The first night that I taped in the ravine, I therefore knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, unless this was a person at 20 of 4 in the morning in the middle of nowhere, that the Sasquatches were back here again. And this inspired me to really redouble my efforts. It's long been thought that Sasquatch will hunt collaboratively with coyotes or wolves. And 20 minutes after this knock happened, in just about the same place, also quite close to my recorder, these sounds rose up. So at least we know that in the same place, at about the same time, there were Sasquatches and either wolves or coyotes. I can't tell which. And after these canids sounded off for almost an hour, there came another sort of howling that may still be them, but also may be Sasquatch. See what you think.
You could make a tree house in one of these trees and then watch.
It's June 14th.
And Woods Rule.
And Woods Rule, she's having a good time in here even though it's almost dark. She's brave. I'm leaving this peanut butter right up here, right next to the recorder, that far away. Okay, time to vacate. All right, honey, let's go.
Aww.
The only house that's anywhere near my listening post is right up here at the northern outlet of the ravine. She's close by the edge of the ravine where I leave my recorder, but the house is almost abandoned. Someone comes by and mows the grass, but I hardly ever see a car here. I think she just comes with her family on vacation. Well, this is sort of interesting. The peanut butter is now down there. I suppose it could have been pushed off or blown off and rolled and found itself right side up. It's possible. That night's audio file revealed two main events. The first, hours after I had heard any other birds, and a couple hours before the chorus of birds at dawn. We have this songbird singing, and then a few seconds later, something that no bird could accomplish. It sounds like a large tree branch pushed violently to the ground, or else an entire tree. This reminds me of something that a friend and I recorded when we were camping in New Hampshire a few years ago. The pull down of a tree and the bomb-like impact. I was eager to see what sounds may have been recorded around the moving of the peanut butter jar. I was pretty sure it was going to be just something nondescript, some little rodent that had pushed it over, or that the wind had blown it over and it would have heard it hitting the ground and rolling, because the recorder is very sensitive and would have easily picked that up. What I heard instead was pretty astonishing. So I'm sitting here listening at the computer, and you have to listen to 8 hours for each night because you can't necessarily rely on these little spikes in the sonogram to clue you in that there's something worth listening to, because lots of times worthwhile things like distant knocks occur and don't even register on the sonogram. So I'm listening along, still wondering what happened to the peanut butter. We have what sounds like possible footsteps. It sounds like bipedal footsteps, but I've been fooled many times before by mice jumping and, chipmunks taking little jumps and what could be bunny rabbits. Step, step, stop. Step, step, stop. Step, step, stop. Like whatever it is coming closer to the rock and to the human objects in a very tentative way. And that approach is pretty extended. So already by this point, I've ruled out a mouse and pretty well ruled out a chipmunk. It doesn't seem to move like a bear would move. They just kind of come up to the thing and do whatever they're going to do. They don't have a cagey kind of movement. And then it finally gets there, and whatever it is makes contact with the audio recorder. And then whatever it is actually taps, either on the audio recorder or on the lid of the peanut butter jar. So that rules out a lot of things. I don't think a deer would take its hoof and tap, and a bear wouldn't take its one claw and tap on the top. It's definitely carefully tapping and checking out the object. So the next day I did a test, and the audio you're going to hear, of course, is picked up by the recorder. My best guess is that it was tapping on the peanut butter lid, because there's a slightly different tone. Then it taps again. Maybe it stepped around the rock and came back from a different angle. I don't know. And then listen to this. It runs away. Listen to how heavy it is. That too rules out all kinds of rodents, as if they hadn't been ruled out by the tapping. Nowhere in the whole recording do we hear the jar falling, hitting the ground, rolling, as would have had to happen if it hadn't been carried to where it was standing upright. Could it have been a raccoon? They are kind of curious and primate-like and could conceivably have tapped. But first of all, they don't tend to suddenly leave and heavily stomp away from where they're investigating something. They tend to stay there and keep monkeying around, so to speak, with whatever they're trying to get at and eat. And secondly, I'm not sure we have to bend over so far backwards and be far-fetched about it. Given this, we know there are Sasquatches there. Why wouldn't one of them have come and checked out some new item in its territory? And take a big bite out of one of them. That's to show them that we're sharing with them and that it's safe to eat. Good. Perfect, honey. That'll show them definitely that we've shared with them. We've done this off and on for quite a while. The third time in a row that this has been unmoved. Leave a sandwich on top, which will probably be taken by a rodent, but we'll see what difference that may make. An encouraging detail is just cropped up right below where I park. I now see this. This tree was not bent over before. It's absolutely new. And how I know this is that this is a power line cut. And this caught my attention because many people have noted that they hear and see signs along these cuts. They think Sasquatch hunt deer use these to communicate, knocking on these poles and finding deer avenues for easier travel. And so I paid attention to the presence of this right next to the ravine, and I would have definitely noted this. And it hasn't been any ice or snow around because it's June, nor have we had any storms. That's why I've been able to leave the recorder for 5 nights in a row. It's been absolutely beautiful and still. Right now it's beginning to rain and blow, so I won't be able to record for a while. At the base of it, there's not ground conducive to picking up tracks. It's very hard and dry. Oh, I just noticed this cute little one too. Maybe a juvenile did this one to mirror its parent. They both definitely remind me of what happened between the first and second times I ever came into the ravine in August of 2007. The first time it was just a clear logging road down into the bottom of the ravine, and the second time we had these 2 trees pulled over identically next to each other. June 24th. This is how it is. Doesn't look like anything very intelligent happened. One thing it tells us that I didn't notice at the time is that the sandwich has been rotated. Here's what it looked like when I had last seen it the day before, and here's how I found it. But I will say, it's kind of strange that if it was a rodent, it doesn't appear that any nibbles have been taken out of this. That's kind of weird. Now this next part happens at dusk, not very late at all. Whatever it is comes crashing toward the rock, and I imagine it coming down the steep hill above the rock. This next part I'm letting play out in real time so that you can hear just how cautiously it approaches after the initial pretty chaotic sequence. it finally gets near the rock, you can begin to hear flies. These flies are not associated with the sandwich because they weren't there before, and after this thing leaves, they're never buzzing around for the rest of the night. Now at this point, after turning down the sandwich, our visitor seems to leave, but he doesn't really get very far. You don't hear him kind of disappearing into the distance. One way we can tell that he's still around is that, strangely enough, little pebbles seem to be dropped onto the big rock. Can you imagine a bear actually declining to eat a free sandwich? You could actually hear it licking its chops a couple times, like it wants to taste it. But it doesn't trust it, or it's not allowed to take it by the rules of the game or the rules of the group. Maybe the recorder has it spooked. Or maybe it's just that I should have taken a bite out of that sandwich. Could this be a deer? Maybe deer don't even like peanut butter. Maybe they only eat leaves and branches and roots. And then I quickly found a YouTube video that put that to rest.
A friendly deer likes peanut butter.
And I don't think a deer makes this sound. I listened intently to the audio file, and never did I hear any exit footsteps. But he's not too close either, because we don't still hear the flies. He's just nearby, lingering. At a certain point we hear a mid-range knock, which must come from farther away than our visitor currently is. So this tells me that we have at least two around here. But I couldn't imagine that the visitor had just sat there all night. until right before dawn. This reminds me of a situation 5 years ago that I documented in a video called Sounds of a Sasquatch Stakeout. I had a thermal camera and an audio recorder by a lake at my research site 11 miles away from here. And the one knocking individual stayed for 6 hours very close to the recorder and communicated with others who were knocking at different distances. It seemed to me that this one had been stationed on sort of guard duty to keep tabs on the foreign element, the potential source of trouble or uncertainty. And here, too, it seems that after refraining from taking the sandwich, this individual stayed put. At the habituation site in East Texas, where I've spent a lot of time, I also experienced one night this strategy of stationing one of them by the trouble spot or by the human element. This is the same place where in 2008 I had filmed with a thermal camera a Sasquatch spying on a small group of us through a wood pile. I was car camping, maybe 35 or 40 feet from the chicken coop. Woo! Some bells on Pretty Ribbon. Because I think I know why it was knocking right before dawn the other morning to communicate with one of its group, at least one, that was out of earshot of the recorder. But I don't really know why it would continue to toss pebbles onto this rock. And there's absolutely no surface around here for those to land on and make the sound that they make. There's no other rock. Everything is wood. Nothing even approaching flat. Why not just stay and monitor the situation? Why try to affect it or interact with it or anything like that? So now we'll give it a reason. It might be because it produces a reaction. Like I cover up with black tape the main light. But there's another one here that I haven't been covering up. So when a pebble lands, it makes this red light twinkle. Oh, and I now see that there's another light I didn't know about that is not covered. And you know, I thought this window went dark automatically. And it doesn't. Good Lord, I'm putting on a light show out there. What I do, though, is I put it face down. But it's not flat like this is. It's a little bit up on that boulder surface. So you get a twinkle response and a lot of light coming out the side. I just wish I could find any of these pebbles. They must be really small because they make a very little, a subtle sound. But you know, it could be any of these dropping down the end of this boulder. They're around. So it's so hard to establish this. You'd think there'd be some leftover on the rock, because so many of the landings sound so low impact that they would just stay put up here. But I don't see a single one. It's just a deepening mystery. I guess it's conceivable that whoever it is sitting right here. There's a little shelf not too far above. They could just toss it down there to get the twinkle response if they found that compelling. I've been racking my brain for some alternative explanation, like, things dropping from trees above this surface here. There's a birch tree. And even if it were like even an acorn producing tree, like an oak, they don't sound like that. They hit hard and they bounce away usually in one sharp impact. These are tiny things that bounce. So it's really mysterious. I thought, well, could there be squirrels or chipmunks sitting up here and dropping part of their nutshells onto the rock? Well, first of all, you'd see nutshells left here. Second of all, I don't hear any whatsoever movement of chipmunks or squirrels. If they climb up on the rock, I definitely would hear them. All I hear is bouncing mice sometimes through the leaves, like choo, 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 which are very easy to mistake for footsteps. But I learned the hard way years ago that those are mice. Well, could they be mice coming up here on the rock? Dropping, what would they drop that would sound like that? And if they dropped anything, why wouldn't they be left here? Why wouldn't we hear the mice climbing aboard in the first place? And why wouldn't that sandwich have been nibbled by mice who are always up for a little treat? It's just thoroughly puzzling to me. I'll do a test here. I've got some pebbles. Again, they'd have to be pretty little. The night that I left the bells, I didn't hear anything from them on the audio file, but I think that our subjects were at least in the vicinity. And here's a small collection of other sounds I recorded in the ravine during June. As dramatic and decisive as these sounds are, believe it or not, I'm starting to get a sense of repetitiveness, and I keep looking for ways to raise the stakes or raise their level of interest or engagement so that we can keep getting new responses. I got the first one that I found, and luckily we discovered that it was not strong enough, and I don't want it popping on them, startling and possibly alienating them. So went back and got a larger and more robust kind. This time, I'm not taping over any of the lights. And I'm leaving this beautiful illustration by Jeff Caramagna. See what the heck they make of that. You know, maybe I'll just put this balloon down here so it won't distract them and possibly keep them away from seeing the picture. That'll go down here. At this point, I just kind of want to stop and take stock a little bit. Um, this has been the most productive few weeks of research I've ever had. I'm learning a lot. First of all, even though I knew this, I'm getting kind of granular understanding of the fact that they may not be 180 degrees the opposite of the popular conception of the aggressive monster, but they are 173 degrees or something like that away. I mean, 99% of their behavior, at least that I've been able to pick up on, is extremely subtle and repetitive, kind of like OCD when it comes to keeping tabs on the human element that I've injected in there. It could be that the role of this small group is as monitor or guard, and that there are others who are the hunters, and the mothers are off mothering. But at least these ones that I'm listening to here are extremely keyed in and allow themselves only occasional, very rare outbursts. It's funny, this whole psychology of rising expectations. You know, just a few weeks ago, I would have been thrilled to be receiving these pieces of data that now are starting to seem repetitive. Of course, after listening for hours, when I'm suddenly greeted by something like this, my heart still skips a beat, and I'm amazed and grateful to be witness to such a thing, even acoustically. But these are not exactly behaving in the classic manner of a habituation site. I think when they come to your house, they're more apt to take gifts and leave gifts because they're interacting with you. Here they're interacting with what to them is an unknown presence, a piece of technology that they don't know if it's a threat. One thing I found absolutely fascinating was the balloon squeak that I got. It was just one. It's like, I can't even really replicate it. That's getting closer. But think about it. I mean, there's nothing in nature that could produce that other than something rubbing a balloon with their hands. I mean, I guess two deer could put the balloon between their two noses and somehow manage to squeak it. But realistically, it's something going like this. I mean, it's a helium balloon. This one isn't. But it was just dangling up in the air, loose. And so it's not pressing against anything. And even if it pressed against the bark of the nearby tree, it's not going to squeak against it. It had to be what I know it was. It's amazing that after producing that interesting sound, the individual that produced it didn't do it again. I kept listening, expecting that surely it would do it again. But it was just that once. Maybe it freaked it out, or maybe it got in trouble from the others for touching this. Who the heck knows? And they've been also very mute so far. I haven't had any vocalizations that I can clearly determine to be vocalizations. So they seem to like the balloon, or at least one of them did. So I thought that I would give them something to play music on if they won't use their voices, but they will ring bells. I thought I would up the ante a little in that direction. All right, I have 5 low individual bells. For variety, I have this wind chime made out of wood pieces. And this one here is about 11 feet off the ground. The celestial chimes are the highest. Then we have the wooden ones, which are about 5 feet high. Then we have the individual low bells. And here's the layout. There's the rock, and the recorder is up on there. I've taken the picture off the rock and tacked it to this tree. And I'd say probably 30 feet to this arch that I'm using. It's always so strange to come back in the morning. It's like coming onto a stage setting in a theater after the actors have left town. It's like the opposite of drama. But then, once you plug into this, it breathes life back into the scene. Here's a montage of some of the riffs, rattles, and taps I've recorded over the last few weeks. In a weak moment, I decide to leave out a lantern and to actually film the boulder. It's July 16th. We're doing the lantern experiment with the frozen balloon wrapped in black plastic, covered with pine needles. We'll see. Now I know intellectually that this won't work and that they are famously averse to cameras. How they know when they're there is one of the enduring mysteries of this field of research. Of course, if they didn't know they were there, we would have solved this decades ago. I figured they've been so very consistent, coming around every night so far. So this spot that I've come upon must be a firm part of their routine. Given what I've learned about how the monitors come in close and check out the foreign element, I thought I might catch even just a glimpse. Listening to the audio from that night, it's striking the difference. There are no pebble drops. And I haven't shared with you even 30% of the pebble drops that I have recorded. I'd say there are between 15 and 25 of them per night. It just became tedious to even document them, much less share them with the viewers. But this night, with the lantern and the camera, there are 0 pebble drops, which shows, incidentally, that they're not coming from some consistent natural source beyond Sasquatch. Well, I guess I'll never know whether it was the camera or the lantern. It wouldn't make sense to leave a camera there with no light source, nor would it make sense to leave a lantern with no camera, because I don't want to alienate them any further than I apparently already have. The question now becomes, will they return on the other side of this foolish gambit, or have I lost them? They're free to bug out and relocate if they feel like the heat is on too much. So perhaps I've learned that they will come in close and monitor something minor, like my audio recorder, but not something major. Maybe that tips the balance, and they vacate. I'm going to take this away because it's probably associated with the
It likes me.
offense of the other night. And we're going to leave an apology offering. Very simple, straightforward. We'll see if they hold a grudge. It occurs to me that since they don't seem to hold a grudge, they just go back to the same behavior, and that by day we're more on a level playing field together, and you're not trying to trick them, and that the woods are both our territories. At night, it's definitely theirs, and I am invading it with the recorder, much less with a camera and a bright light. The daytime approach, not hidden whatsoever. And then, of course, it's hideously tantalizing to watch the footage after that, thinking that at any moment and right adjacent to the boulder, there's this big, huge piece of birch bark speared to the top of this tree like a hat. Another thing is, last night my daughter noticed this potential structure right here. I mean, you got two things coming through. You can see that this one that grows here comes up and then weaves inside here on the other side of this cross piece. It's this kind of rudimentary weaving that is often a very good indication. And then you have this one coming down through, and you wonder, well, where does that come from? You look up. So you don't know how they would accomplish that, but then again, how would it naturally break at the top and come driving down here and underneath there through the two tree trunks and down here and right at the ground. And it ends like this too. It's not even a natural ending. It was broken. Given the amount of stick breaking I hear on any given night, much more than I've been sharing with you, it seems to me that another signature of Sasquatch activity is just plain sticks lying around. One can readily distinguish this activity from random deadfall. Often the bark will be peeled from these segments. A link may exist to the wood-eating behavior of the mountain gorilla. A recent study by Cornell University primatologists reveals that wood is a crucial source of sodium. In fact, 95% of the gorilla's salt intake comes from this, which makes up just 4% of the bulk of their diet. So I'm listening to the night of July 24th, and out of 8 hours, there's just 7 seconds of usable audio. But it's 7 fascinating seconds. Someone has finally chimed in on the high ones. Um, and although it could be something mistakenly flying into them, it feels like a light brush. It's not a certainty, though. With regard to the low bell, on the other hand, we've got to pay particular attention to just exactly how the bell was rung. I don't know which one of these it was, but we'll just take the closest one. See how it sustains if you ring it and let it go? This rang very clearly and then stopped. I mean, if a bird flew into it, it'd be very different. And we would have been able to hear a bird or a large enough bug. If something fell on it from the side, from above somehow, I don't know what that would be, that too wouldn't get muffled instantly. So it seems to me that it must have grabbed it with its hand once it found out what sound it made. The sort of delicacy involved in tapping and then grabbing it is similar to the delicacy of tapping on the peanut butter jar lid to test it out. And of course then tapping on the picture that I left here for a long time. Tap, 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 tap. It's all very careful, precise. But how do you reconcile that kind of delicacy with the bull in the china shop kind of behavior that we've also witnessed? Is it different individuals with different personalities or different situations? If there's food, they might let down their guard briefly. About 100 yards from the rock is the place I used to come and sit in this chair. I gotta move that out of here. It's just junk. I feel guilty. I choose a secluded location to set up my little listening post, and I wedge 3 tomatoes from my garden in between these 2 tree trunks. 3 days later, I return to find that one of the 3 tomatoes is missing. Something pretty amazing just happened. Really incredible. I've got chills. I'd sort of figured that the other tomato must be similarly rolled somewhere. And I just went over here to pee, and I found the 3rd tomato up here. I swear to God. And I would never have seen it if I hadn't come over here to pee. It just slung over this branch. So exciting. The next June, 6 years ago this month, I had the second striking incident. When I was sleeping right here, and I had the recorder on the ground, and for 6 hours, I heard stick breaks, break, 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 every few minutes, and then sometimes many breaks in a few seconds. And it just, whatever was doing the breaking seemed to just be circling me and circling me. Who's poking around over there? Occasionally through the night, I hear bird song. Or at least ostensible bird song, coming from the direction of the other sounds. After midnight, to the snapping sound is added a consistent thumping on the ground. Let's talk. I'm awake. I hear you over there. Say something. I'm going to call you Thumper. I really don't remember that things were so roughed up over here. I never had to climb over all this stuff to get to my old campsite. Look at this. This thing is in the shape of like a piece of bark, but it contains wood. So how is that ripped off? So many ripped things. Could be the result of some of what we've been hearing on the audio. It's just a very violently destroyed area, whether from natural sources or not. I mean, there's no other trees down like that around here. See? And there's no opening here that would allow a windstorm to come just down that corridor and nowhere else here. And look at this. Tree limb, upside down, stuck into the ground, and just sticking straight up. And look at this. Very curious piece of work. You have this up, propped on this piece. See, if I take this piece away, that falls right down. Fascinating. So this is why I decided to leave the second audio recorder here, to see if we might catch some of this behavior. Okay, I'm going to synchronize these two recorders now. I've put the second recorder up underneath that rock there and wrapped it with black tape as best I can to really try to hide the light. And this one goes back on the same old boulder here, but just for fun I'm going to add see what that inspires. Okay, I'm standing about midway between the two recorders now, and I'm going to do a yell so that I can make sure they're synced up. This tree push is barely audible from recorder number 2. Whereas these thumps, a little later in the night, are only audible on recorder number 2. What surprises me here is how very localized these sounds are. On August 4th, only the first knock is heard by both recorders. The second picks it up much more weakly than the Boulder recorder. which again gives us a hint as to location. And then, shortly after, comes a delightfully rambunctious playfulness that is not picked up at all by recorder number 2. It only occurs nearer to the boulder. All of these percussions you're going to hear now occur within just 3 minutes and 44 seconds after that initial knock. And then after the motorcycles, we don't hear anything further from Sasquatch during the night. This whole 2-recorder method has really been a revelation to me. It's like suddenly being able to hear in stereo. And it's not really that much more time consuming because I can actually listen to both tracks at once. And if I hear something, I just go back and figure out which recorder it was. It's just so exciting. It's like a completely ear-opening experience because I feel like I can begin to draw a bead on them in 3-dimensional space. I hope next year to be able to employ at least 3 recorders so that I can better triangulate their position and their movement. I think it would be great to hear one doing something here and then hear it approach the other recorder doing the same thing, so that we would know that at that particular place, in that exact time, this Sasquatch was doing this. Eventually be able to track their movements and recognize some patterns of behavior. Ideally, of course, you'd have a whole array throughout a territory that they frequent. And I think this is going to be the most promising approach going forward because they're not going to let you videotape their behavior. Anything you can get on videotape is going to be a fleeting event, a kind of a snapshot in time. Whereas when you're able to put your ear to the keyhole of their world at night and understand what they do throughout an entire night and then throughout a whole season, etc., you can really begin to draw closer to them. But this whole methodology is going to need to be enriched and refined over time. And that's why I'd like to reach out to other researchers and find among you people who would be willing to be partners in this Sasquatch listening project. I've started a Facebook group and I urge you to come join. It's an open group. Eventually, I hope that we can become an army of Jane Goodalls of Sasquatch acoustics so that we can begin to compare and contrast how they behave on audio throughout North America. Do you find the same sorts of drum riffs and rattles and more subtle behavior, pebble tossing that I've found? Is your group going to be more vocal than mine was? You know, all sorts of levels of personality that we can begin to tease out from this very patient, very passive, very receptive process. There's a tapping sound that I initially thought was a woodpecker. But you hear how irregular, how kind of syncopated. 8 minutes and 32 seconds go by, and then some more tapping picks up, after which you'll hear what the woodpecker does next. I had been planning to continue recording in the same way through September, but what you're going to see in a few minutes at the end of this video convinced me that it was time to shift my approach and try for more real-time interactions in the ravine. And so if I get any luck with that, I'll be posting the next video called Interactions in the Ravine. So tonight we've got these nifty and mesmerizing items. Oh boy, how can you resist? I was here 5 hours ago. Okay, it's about 2:30 in the afternoon. This is by far the earliest I've ever put out one of these recorders. My hope is that they're not around this time of day, but I'll probably find out different when I listen. It's like a beacon. The boulder's about here. I put one up here above it, and then one down here, deeper in toward the bottom of the ravine. And I always thought that they were just automatically going to come at me from above, where they have a more guaranteed escape route, where there are no roads, and there's also a nice pond, that they would naturally gravitate toward. But the surprising thing was that on this night, they were down here, down in this area. In fact, there's a lot of ravine that is undeveloped down toward here. So I think I may be orienting myself incorrectly, at least a lot of the time. I recorded a bunch of sounds during the night, very similar to what I've played for you before. But it was the hour between 6 and 7, right after dawn, that is the most interesting, and it's all audible only from the lower recorder. And this is the one I came walking to at 7. And for that hour before I arrived, we have a veritable symphony of percussion and sheer kinetic energy down here. I had no idea what I was walking into. The last clip is from just 6 minutes before I get there, and then you'll hear my very stealthy arrival. The second recorder is still running. It's before 7. I'm trying something different. The second recorder is still running. subtle, but it's definitely been responses. As you can see, the forest is too thick for me to spot the source of these knocks. I didn't go charging forward. That would have been very unlikely to succeed, would have been exceedingly unneighborly, and would have been counterproductive in the long run. I'm trying to build a relationship. Instead, I decided to just set the camera down, keep the recorder running, and leave the area for 45 minutes. I first made a wide circle around behind where it seemed the knocking was coming from, and I made a few knocks of my own to see if that would prompt the individual to move toward the camera. He or she kept knocking a few times for a while I was away, but surprise, surprise, didn't make an appearance. It took me a while to notice that right here where I park are two forms of no trespassing sign. The human and the Sasquatch. This tree band pinned down by a crosspiece. In our line of work, I think it's best to carefully sidestep such advisories.